You won't believe what happened to this war hero when he needed help the most. Sir, I need you to stand up now. What are you doing here? When will my service give me the right to be heard, not just seen? A soldier who fought for our country was on his knees, begging for help. Then something amazing happened. A big military helicopter landed right in the hospital parking lot. They said Colonel David Miller would die waiting for help at Westview Medical Center. But then, against all odds, a Black Hawk helicopter landed in the hospital parking lot. This started a daring rescue that showed how badly some people were being treated. It also started a huge fight across the country for soldiers' rights. The morning was foggy when Westview Medical Center stood tall over the quiet city streets. Its glass walls reflected the pale light, cold and unfriendly. Inside, it smelled like cleaning products. You could hear the buzz of bright lights and people walking around nervously. The waiting room had all kinds of people. Some looked hopeful, others looked like they'd given up. The air felt heavy and tense. Colonel David Miller, who was 67 years old, walked in slowly. Each step hurt because he was in pain. He used to stand up straight and proud, but now he was bent forward a little. His hand was pressed hard against his chest. All those years serving in the military had left scars you couldn't see. But today, it was his heart that was failing him. His dark eyes used to be sharp and commanding in his uniform. Now they flickered with worry and fear. He had survived fights in other countries, but this was a battle for his life. And he was fighting it in a place that was supposed to help him get better. David's whole life had been about being disciplined and brave. He had won awards for being courageous in combat. He had gone through hard times that tested how much a person could handle. But, here in this hospital, he was facing a new kind of fight. It was against a system that seemed like it didn't care about him. Maybe it was even mean to him. His daughter Sarah was a successful lawyer. She had told him to get help right away, but the cold way people treated him was a harsh reminder. There were still barriers in his way. At the front desk, Susan Clark was the receptionist. She had very bright blonde hair and a fake smile. She barely even looked at him. Nearby, Mark Thompson was the security guard. He watched with narrow eyes. You could see suspicion all over his face. Even though David was clearly in trouble, sweat on his forehead, trouble breathing, he was left waiting. Other people who came after him got to see the doctor first. The clean white walls seemed to close in on him. The air felt thick with silent judgment. The challenge wasn't just the pain in his chest, it was also the invisible wall of prejudice. His strength was getting weaker, but he refused to give up. This wasn't just a fight for his life, it was a fight against a system that wanted to let him fall. Colonel David Miller decided to come to Westview Medical Center because he was desperate, and it was urgent. The stabbing pain in his chest had gotten worse through the night. Each breath was getting harder and more difficult. Memories of past battles flashed through his mind, but this was a fight unlike any other. This one was for his very life. His daughter Sarah's voice echoed in his thoughts. She was firm and insistent. "Dad, don't wait. Get help now." Despite his pride and stubbornness, he knew she was right. As he walked up to the reception desk, hope flickered faintly inside him. But the cold hospital environment felt unwelcoming. The bright fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell made him uncomfortable. Susan Clark, the receptionist with unnaturally bright blonde hair and a practiced fake smile, barely looked up from her computer screen. "Name?" she asked. Her tone was clipped and detached. "David Miller, chest pains," he replied. His voice was strained but steady. He was trying to hide his growing fear. Susan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she said flatly, "Wait your turn." Nearby, Mark Thompson, the security guard, watched David with narrow eyes. Suspicion was carved deep in his face. When David shifted uncomfortably, Mark's voice cut through the quiet waiting room. "Sir, are you drunk?" David's jaw clenched tightly. A flicker of hurt and disbelief crossed his face. "No," he said quietly, but the accusation hung in the air, unchallenged. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. White patients who arrived after David were called in first. Their names echoed through the sterile halls. David's breaths grew shorter, sweat beaded on his forehead. His hand pressed harder against his chest, but no one came to help. Sarah arrived. Her eyes were sharp and filled with determination. She scanned the room quickly and immediately confronted Sharon Green, the supervising nurse. Sharon was tall and thin. She had prematurely gray hair that framed a face hardened by years of dealing with hospital rules. "My father is having a heart attack," Sarah said. Her voice was firm and unwavering. "He needs help right now." Sharon's eyes flickered with annoyance, but she kept a professional mask. "We follow protocol," she replied. Her tone was cool and dismissive. Maria Sanchez was a young black nurse's aide on probation. She stood nearby. She noticed David's worsening condition, the color of his skin, the labored breathing, the beads of sweat on his forehead. Her heart pounded as she risked her job to do a quick check on him. The results were undeniable. David was having a heart attack. Sarah's voice grew sharper as she threatened to take legal action. This forced Dr. Stephen Parker, who was reluctant and defensive, to order urgent tests. The results confirmed the truth. David was dying. In a quiet, tense moment away from prying eyes, Maria slipped Sarah a USB drive. It contained damning evidence, A pattern of delayed treatment and 3 minority patient deaths at Westview Medical Center. General William Ives, David's longtime friend and a high-ranking military officer, was contacted immediately. The stakes had risen beyond a single patient. This was now a fight for justice. This moment marked the beginning of a battle. It wasn't only for David's life, but against a system full of prejudice, neglect, and institutional failure. Sarah's resolve hardened, Maria's courage blossomed, and David's fate hung dangerously in the balance. Despite the clear and urgent diagnosis of a heart attack, Colonel David Miller was moved to a low-priority ward. It was a dimly lit room at the far end of Westview Medical Center. The walls, once white, now appeared dingy and cold. They reflected the hospital's indifference. Sarah refused to leave her father's side. Her eyes scanned every movement of the staff. Her hands tightly clutched his frail ones. She carefully wrote down every delay, every dismissive glance, every whispered excuse. Dr. Michael Chen was a careful and principled physician who was new to Westview. He had been looking at David's chart when he noticed glaring problems. The notes didn't match up. Vital signs were underreported. The urgency of David's condition was downplayed. Confronting Dr. Stephen Parker, the attending physician, Chen's voice was steady but firm. "Why is the patient's condition being minimized? This is clearly a heart emergency." Parker's response was cold and evasive. "We have considerations, protocols. Sometimes we have to make judgment calls." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting bias?" Parker's silence spoke volume. Meanwhile, Maria Sanchez faced mounting pressure. Her advocacy for David had not gone unnoticed by hospital administration. Rumors circulated that her probationary status was in jeopardy, yet Maria's resolve only strengthened. She quietly rallied other staff members who had witnessed similar neglect. She shared stories of patients whose conditions were overlooked, especially those from minority backgrounds. Hospital CEO John Adams was an impeccably dressed man with a calm demeanor. He was caught in the eye of a brewing storm. As news crews arrived, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward, Adams struggled to maintain control. His carefully crafted public statements about commitment to patient care rang hollow in the face of mounting evidence. Colonel Thomas Wilson was a Blackboard member of Westview and a veteran himself. He was not content to watch silently. He demanded a meeting with Adams. His voice was low but resolute. "This is not just about one patient," Wilson said. "It's about systemic failure. We must act now." Sarah uncovered a shocking truth. Ambulances were parked idly on hospital grounds, yet David's transfer was inexplicably delayed. She confronted hospital staff. Her legal background sharpened her questions. Why are these ambulances not being used? Is this deliberate? Social media exploded as veterans groups and activists rallied around David's story. Hashtags calling for justice trended nationwide. The public outcry grew louder with each passing hour. In a desperate attempt to cover up, Dr. Parker tried to change David's medical records. Maria, ever vigilant, captured the act on her phone, adding fuel to the fire. Dr. Chen was suspended for refusing to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would silence him. His principled stand only drew more attention to the hospital's failings. Senator Robert Davis was a silver-haired political heavyweight, with deep ties to private prison corporations known for mistreating black veterans. He intervened. He pressured hospital leadership to suppress the scandal, threatening funding cuts and political fallout. General William Ives, David's longtime friend and a respected military figure, was contacted. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he reached out to Brigadier General Laura King, commander of a nearby military medical facility, requesting urgent intervention. The battle lines were drawn. David's fight for survival had become a fight for justice, exposing the rot at the heart of a system that had failed its most vulnerable. The atmosphere inside Westview Medical Center had shifted from tense to volatile. Senator Robert Davis was a man whose silver hair and polished demeanor hid the ruthless political operator beneath. He was determined to suppress any scandal that threatened his vast interests. His connections to private prison corporations, infamous for mistreating black veterans, gave him a personal stake in silencing Colonel David Miller's story. As news of Miller's plight spread beyond the hospital walls, Davis mobilized precision security consultants, a shadowy firm specializing in handling sensitive matters discreetly. Their operatives arrived at Westview with quiet menace. Their presence was a chilling reminder to staff that speaking out would come at a price. Whispers of intimidation and veiled threats rippled through the corridors. Inside the hospital, Susan Clark, the receptionist who had once dismissed David's pleas, found herself racked with guilt. The weight of conscience pressed heavily on her. One late evening after her shift, she secretly recorded a conversation with a supervisor. It revealed the hospital's unwritten policy, delaying or denying care to minority patients to manage costs and avoid scrutiny. With trembling hands, she passed this crucial evidence to Maria Sanchez. Maria, despite the risk of immediate termination, used the distraction Susan created to help move David to the hospital's rooftop helipad. The air was thick with urgency and fear. "Dr. Michael Chen, Maria, and a small group of sympathetic staff formed a protective circle around David. They were shielding him from hospital security, who were determined to prevent the transfer. Colonel Thomas Wilson, a black board member of Westview and a veteran himself, invoked military emergency protocols. He asserted that David, as a decorated veteran, was under military medical jurisdiction. His voice was steady, commanding respect. "This man's life is not yours to gamble with." Sarah Miller faced relentless pressure. Political operatives aligned with Davis threatened her legal career, attempting to intimidate her into silence. Attempts were made to erase David's military records, undermining his identity and claim to care. But Sarah's resolve only hardened. Fueled by love and justice, the story exploded into the national spotlight. Social media campaigns, veteran organizations, and civil rights groups amplified the outrage. Hashtags demanding justice trended nationwide, and public protests erupted outside the hospital. Hospital CEO John Adams found himself cornered, forced to convene emergency board meetings. His carefully maintained facade of control cracked under the weight of mounting evidence and public fury. David's condition worsened with every passing minute. The rooftop helipad became the stage for a desperate final act. Hospital security attempted to forcibly remove David, but Dr. Chen and Maria stood their ground. Their determination was unwavering. The tension was palpable, a battle between compassion and cold bureaucracy. Outside, storm clouds gathered, mirroring the turmoil within. Jessica Rodriguez, a skilled Black Hawk pilot, prepared for a daring rescue mission. Her aircraft was fueled and ready, but the weather threatened to delay what could be David's last chance. Inside the hospital, heated debates raged. Senator Davis tried to control the narrative, deploying media allies to spin the story. But the truth was too powerful, and the tide of public opinion was turning against him. The moment of reckoning was near. Lives, reputations, and the very soul of the institution hung in the balance. This crisis was not just about one man's survival. It was a battle for dignity, equality, and the right to be seen and cared for without prejudice. The storm outside Westview Medical Center was relentless. It was not merely weather. It was like a war. Rain hammered the rooftop helipad where Colonel David Miller lay, pale and fragile. Here was a soldier being defeated, not by an enemy on the battlefield, but by decay from within. Every howl of wind through the metal railings was like a taunt. Every distant rumble of thunder seemed to echo the turmoil boiling in the hospital's corridors. Time was slipping away, and every breath David took was a battle against the creeping darkness inside the hospital. Tension crackled like electricity. In a private, dimly lit office furnished with polished mahogany meant to show power and permanence, Senator Robert Davis had summoned Sarah Miller. Davis was a man whose polished exterior hid a ruthlessness honed over decades of political maneuvering. He looked at her with eyes as cold as chips of ice. The walls seemed to close in as his voice dropped to a chilling whisper, a sound more menacing than a shout. "Sign these liability waivers and non-disclosure agreements," Davis demanded, sliding a thick stack of papers across the polished desk. The gesture was smooth, practiced. "They are standard procedure, Sarah, to protect your father's privacy, to protect the reputation of this institution." Sarah stared at the stack. Each page was a link in the chain he meant to bind her with. "Standard procedure," she countered, her voice trembling with anger, not fear. "This is hush money. My father is upstairs fighting for his life, and you are down here trying to bury him under paperwork? Be practical," Davis scoffed. "If this story gets out, it will become a media circus. Your father's care will be compromised. Your career, that promising career your father is so proud of, will be over. I can ensure that." He paused, letting the threat settle, and his case will vanish. He'll get the best care money can buy. Quietly. Don't, and it all disappears. Sarah's eyes blazed with defiance. "My father's life is not a bargaining chip, and his legacy will not be defined by your silence. I will not be silenced." Outside that suffocating office, the hospital corridors buzzed with a different kind of energy, one of quiet rebellion. Maria Sanchez, the young nurse's aide who had risked everything to stand by David, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. In a poorly lit records room in the basement, surrounded by the smell of dust and old paper, she had found something far more sinister than individual negligence. On a flickering computer monitor, a pattern had emerged. 3 other black veterans, Valerius, Jackson, Thompson, had died under eerily similar circumstances at Westview over the past 2 years. All were decorated soldiers. All were admitted for supposedly routine procedures, and all were dead within 72 hours from sudden, unexplained complications. Their cases had been quietly buried beneath layers of bureaucratic paperwork and official-sounding excuses. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a systematic failure cloaked in silence. Her hand trembled as she quickly copied the files to an encrypted drive upstairs. Dr. Michael Chen, a man whose principles were as careful as his medical work, had felt the shift in the hospital's atmosphere. Outrage was its own kind of contagion, and it was spreading. He had gathered a group of like-minded hospital staff, nurses, technicians, even orderlies in a disused break room. His voice was low and urgent. "We all took an oath," he said, meeting the eyes of each person. "That oath doesn't have a political exemption. They are not taking that man out of here like he's a piece of broken furniture. Not on our watch." Together, they formed a human shield. Around the helipad entrance, standing firm against hospital security officers, intent on removing David by force, their faces were grim, their determination unshakable. They were healers, not soldiers, but tonight they had drawn a line. The rooftop helipad was a stark stage for this desperate standoff. The rain made the concrete beneath their feet slippery, and the cold bit through their scrubs and uniforms. The group's breath formed clouds in the chill air as they shielded David's gurney from the advancing security team, whose faces were emotionless, but whose eyes betrayed their uncertainty. Outside in the raging storm, Captain Jessica Rodriguez prepared her Black Hawk helicopter for a daring rescue mission. Rain lashed the windshield, and violent gusts of wind tried to shove the powerful machine off its balance. "Visibility is near zero, Captain," her co-pilot yelled over the intercom. "He held the line for us in Kandahar, Mike," Jessica replied, her voice calm and sure. "We're holding it for him now." This mission was personal, a chance to save a fellow veteran denied the care he deserved. Back on the rooftop, Senator Davis arrived with a small group. His expression was a mask of cold fury as he saw the defiant wall of people. The tension was so thick you could feel it, a silent war waged in glances and clenched jaws. "You are making a grave mistake," Davis hissed, his voice barely audible over the howl of the wind. "You are blocking the operations of a private facility. All of you will face the consequences." Colonel Thomas Wilson, a black board member of Westview, and a veteran himself, stepped forward. His presence was tall and commanding. His voice was steady and authoritative, cutting through the noise of the storm with ease. "No, Senator, you are the one making the mistake. This facility was built on the promise to care for men like him, a promise you are actively breaking. This man's records will not be wiped clean. We will not let you erase his service or his suffering. This ends now." Just then, as if cued by the dramatic escalation, David's heart faltered. He collapsed, a single gasp escaping his lips, the color draining from his face. "We're losing him," Dr. Chen shouted. The medical team sprang into action, their choreographed chaos becoming a symphony of practiced urgency. CPR began, the rhythmic compressions on David's chest. A grim drum beat against the thundered out. The seconds stretched into an eternity as they fought to bring him back from the brink. Sarah knelt beside him, her face streaked with rain and tears, whispering, "Please." The storm outside seemed to intensify. A flash of lightning tore across the sky as if nature itself was bearing witness to the struggle unfolding below. Then, through the gale came a new sound, a rhythmic roaring beat growing louder. Captain Rodriguez's Black Hawk descended from the black sky, its searchlights cutting through the downpour like divine fingers. The helicopter touched down with a roar, its blades slicing through the tempestuous air. The downdraft was so powerful, it sent Davis's security guards stumbling back. The side door slid open. The medical team, without a moment's hesitation, lifted David onto a stretcher and rushed him aboard. Inside, monitors beeped steadily. "We're given," and hands worked tirelessly to make him stable. As the Black Hawk rose into the turbulent sky, Sarah looked down. Senator Davis was a small, powerless figure on the rooftop, his fury lost to the roar of the engines and the storm. Turmoil outside mirrored the turmoil within, but inside the helicopter, amid the calm focus of the medical team, hope burned bright. The flight to the military medical facility was tense but swift. David's pulse had stabilized. The team was preparing him for the life-saving surgery he should have received days ago. The rescue was a triumph of courage, determination, and solidarity. But this moment marked not just a victory for David Miller, it was a turning point. On the ground, Maria Sanchez's evidence was on its way to an investigative journalist. Dr. Chen and his team were preparing statements. Colonel Wilson's words had planted the seeds of rebellion within Westview's own board. The battle had moved from hospital corridors to the national stage. The storm over Westview Medical Center may have passed, but the coming storm, the one for justice and accountability, was only just beginning. The aftermath of Colonel David Miller's harrowing ordeal at Westview Medical Center spread far beyond the hospital's walls. Though David survived the life-saving surgery at the military medical facility, the battle for justice was only beginning. Dr. Michael Chen, Maria Sanchez, and Susan Clark, key figures who had stood up against the hospital's discriminatory practices, were abruptly fired. Their bravery came at a cost. Sarah Miller, despite her relentless fight, was fired from her law firm under pressure from political forces aligned with Senator Robert Davis. Yet none of this broke their spirit. National media coverage exploded. Investigative journalists uncovered a pattern of neglect and systematic racism at Westview, shining a harsh light on the hospital's failures. Veteran organizations mobilized, rallying public support for reform. Social media campaigns amplified the voices of those who had long been ignored. Senator Davis, once untouchable, found himself under federal investigation. The mounting evidence of corruption, cover-ups, and abuse of power forced his resignation. He faced charges related to obstruction of justice and abuse of office. His political empire crumbled as the truth emerged. Meanwhile, David Miller's survival became a symbol of resilience and the urgent need for change. His story inspired a nationwide movement demanding accountability and fair health care for veterans. The Veterans Equal Care Initiative was founded, led by Sarah Miller, Dr. Michael Chen, Maria Sanchez, now a medical student, and Brigadier General Thomas Wilson. Their mission: to ensure no veteran would suffer neglect or discrimination again. Miller's standards were established as federal guidelines, mandating rigorous oversight, sensitivity training, and specialized veteran care programs across medical institutions. Hospitals nationwide adopted these reforms, transforming the landscape of veteran health care. David himself returned to Westview Medical Center 1 year later. The transformation was remarkable. Policies ensured timely and respectful care for all patients. Veteran liaisons greeted arrivals with understanding and compassion. The cold, sterile atmosphere had been replaced by warmth and dignity. Walking through the corridors, David reflected on the long journey from helplessness and neglect to hope and reform. He saw faces of veterans who, like him, had once been invisible. Now they were seen, heard, and cared for, in a quiet moment. David stood before a plaque honoring those who had fought for change. He felt a deep sense of peace. The battle had been hard fought, but the victory was real. His story was a testament to the power of courage, truth, and collective action. It reminded all that systematic injustice could be challenged, that voices raised in solidarity could break through walls of silence. Sarah, Maria, and Dr. Chen continued their work, advocating tirelessly for veterans' rights. Their bond, forged in crisis, became a beacon of hope for many. The Veterans Equal Care Initiative grew into a nationwide network, supporting veterans and holding institutions accountable. Training programs educated healthcare workers on cultural competence and the unique needs of veterans. David's journey had started with a desperate plea for help. It ended with a legacy that would change lives for generations. The story of Colonel David Miller was no longer just about one man's survival. It was about a nation's reckoning and its commitment to justice. This was the true victory: a system transformed, a community united, and a future where every veteran could walk into a hospital and know they would be treated with the dignity they deserved.